Good morning, Wabash. Speaking today at Pioneer Chapel is Alumnus Kenneth Trey Harnden III with his talk titled, Play Your Own Games. Before graduating from Wabash in 2018, Trey, otherwise known as Teddy, was a brother of Lambda Chi Alpha and a member of the Sphinx Club. Today, Teddy sells software for a Seattle-based startup as his 9-to-5 and works with his fellow Lambda Chi brother, Sky King, to change podcast advertising. He is currently moving to Fort Collins, Colorado, where he will spend his free time skiing, climbing mountains, and researching crypto projects. Please join me in giving Teddy a warm welcome.
Morning, Wabash. First, I'd like to thank Andrew and the Sphinx Club for inviting me today. It's a great honor that I do not take lightly. I'll do my best to be brief today so y'all can get to lunch early, because who wants to hear some alumni ramble on about days of past? Secondly, I'd like to give a major shout out to Roland Morin. Roland helped me forge my own path and play my own games during my time at Wabash, and I wouldn't be here without him, so I'd like to take a moment of silence for him. Thank you. Really what I want to talk about today, though, is what I view as the purpose of a Wabash education and what it can empower you to do. If you take one thing away from today's chat, I hope it's this. Use your time here and opportunity to gain an education to define for yourself what it means to live a good life and play your own games accordingly. In classic Wabash fashion, I think it's important to start breaking down this thesis by looking at the definitions there. You know, what is a good life and what are games? The good life part is a lot more difficult to answer, so let's start with the games. Simply put, everything is a game. There are obvious games, like the one on Saturday against Hiram, or the one later this year against the folks down south. These games have defined rules, defined outcomes. No more than 11 players on the field, most points win. It's easy to understand the outcomes of the game, and the path to winning these games is predefined. But there are many other life games with less defined rules, but still seemingly obvious outcomes. If you want to get married, you need to find a significant other. But what kind of games do you play to make that happen? If you want to show someone that you would like them to be your significant other, do you take them to a picnic at Shades or take them down to Stoney's for a drink? I'll give you a hint, it's not Stoney's. And with either of these choices, if you get blackout, strip naked, and sprint back to your fraternity, you can bet that's the wrong way to show them you're interested. So there is no definite right way to play these dating games, but there are a few quite obvious wrong ways. And yet the outcome is still defined either way. You get a significant other, you get married. But what about games where there isn't a right way to play them and there is no defined outcome? Games like choosing an academic major, getting a good job, or living a happy and fulfilling life. You know, I'll be the first to say anyone who is telling you what it means to live a good life is lying. And why? Because the answer is different for everyone. So spend some time thinking about it during your time here at Wabash. It's critical that you decide for yourself. Because if you let someone else define what a good life is for you, you'll be sad when you eventually realize that your definition of a good life varies vastly different than the one that they told you to adopt. For sake of reference, I'll give you mine. For me, it means that I'm spending my days learning about other people and to work on solutions that help individuals tap into their own free will. Don't worry, this didn't come just to me one Saturday morning after Daytona. It takes time, literally years. But notice that the outcome that I've defined is, roughly defined and flexible. It's not rigid and it's not vague. It's not have a $10 million net worth or change the world. If you choose something too rigid, like make $10 million, you become a slave to the vision. And if you choose something too vague, like change the world, it's easy to get lost in the absurdist void when you can't figure out how to define it or what it means, or feel the pressure of saying, well, how do I, as a small individual, change the world? So once you have this general direction or idea of how you would like to live your life, or the general idea of the games that you would like to play, it's key to find the other side of it, either find the games you want to play or find the direction. And there's no one way to do it. You can find the games first, or you can find the outcome first. And the best part about all of this is that Wabash gives you the tools to play your own game. The education here will give you the tools to win any of these games. And you really have to lean into it with an exploratory mind and an open mind to see what these games are. So really, spend some time over the next few months thinking about what it means to live a good life. Because if you think that getting an Orr Fellowship and then getting the job at Eli Lilly after graduation, which will give me a good job and make me money and lead me to a happy life, is the answer, think about who defined that path. Think about who crafted that idea for you. Because are you really playing your game at that point? Or are you playing a game that somebody else crafted so that you can help them achieve their vision of what it means to live a good life? Without trying to reminisce or soapbox too much, I think it's easy to give some examples about games that I played here at Wabash and games that I didn't play here at Wabash to kind of give examples. I think it's also critical to note that I didn't know my outcome and that definition of trying to help others tap into their free will during my time here. That only came to me after I found the games that I wanted to play and played them for the sake of play. So here are some examples of games that I did not play. I was not a student athlete. I did not play a single sport here. I was an IM champ, so you can count on that one, but that's about it. I didn't care about my GPA, and professors don't want to hear that, but I got a 2.2 my first semester. I was not doing very well. I only graduated with a 2.9, like nothing notable in the slightest. I didn't go after student leadership. I didn't have student government positions. None of those things were interesting to me. And I never had an internship during my entire time at Wabash. So if you hear that kind of resume, you think, oh man, this guy is a dud, a straight up failure. He didn't do any of the things that we're told to do here at Wabash that makes you a successful person, makes you a good Wabash man. But according to the paper resume, it didn't matter either, because what kind of games am I playing if they want my resume? Am I playing my game or their game? So here are some, on the other side of it, you do have to kind of play some games, right? You get a 2.2 every semester, you're not going to make it past junior year, right? You do have to kind of play some of these games, but don't let these others' games define your entire vision and define all the games that you play. So I think here I'll give some examples of games that I played at Wabash and how they led me to where I am today. During my time here, I ran the Brew Society for 3 years. If you don't know what the Brew Society is, we brew beer. During my time, I was able to get tens of thousands of dollars from Student Senate and brewed beer for TGIFs and all sorts of campus events. If no one's running it, all the equipment is down in the basement of the armory. Go get it, super easy, I promise. I guess if you want to say that's leadership, but I didn't do it for the leadership aspect. I just wanted to brew beer for my friends. Same with the academics. I didn't do well academically in terms of a GPA, but I knew I wanted to study Islam and study in the Syrian civil war. And so what did I do? I figured out a way that I could craft my own major because, we're in central Indiana. Islam is not really an option to study, right? But by double majoring in political science and religion, I took a lot of Dr. Wells, took a lot of Dr. Blix, and was able to craft my own major in that sense. And then I got a high pass on comps. So I got a 2.9, but it's quite obvious that I still learned stuff just because I was learning the stuff that I wanted to learn. On the other side of that too, I studied abroad in Morocco. For those of you who don't know, it's a Muslim country in North Africa. We've had lots of people go to Morocco after their time at Wabash, but I think I might have been the first person to go to Morocco during my time here. And I loved it so much that when I came back, I worked with Amy Weir to get a second grant to go back for the summer and study abroad a second time. Skip out on the internships, but get paid to go study abroad a second time. So can't complain about that at all. And one of the things that I really learned during my time there was I got to understand what other people in different countries that don't speak English, that are not Christian, think about how they define what it means to live a good life, think about how they define free will, and learn many things about them. After my time at Wabash, I created my own jobs. I worked for this company called Demand Drive doing sales. But in 2019, I realized I didn't want to climb the corporate ladder. You know, it looks kind of like a trudging path that looks pretty miserable. Woo. And so I told my boss at that point, like, hey, I want to work remote. Let me do that. And we figured out a way that I could build my own job, worked with the company still, and then I lived in my truck in Montana and was a ski bum all winter long while working. So, you know, still had the job, still was playing the societal games, but I did it on my own rules, I did it on my own accord. And then even now with what I'm doing currently, I work with a fellow Lambda Chi brother, Sky King, and we're trying to figure out a way to use NFTs and other crypto technologies to help revamp the way that we monetize media to move it away from ad clicks. And you know, that's not a defined path with a defined outcome, but I know it's a game that I want to play and something that's interesting to me. So while I'm doing all these different things, you know, they helped lead me to this vision of like what it means to me to live a good life. I didn't know what that meant at the time that I was choosing to play these games, but I knew these games were interesting and I wanted to play this. And I was doing it on my own accord. And again, I really want to iterate that like this idea of working with people to find solutions that help others tap into their own free will, I didn't come across that during my time at Wabash. That came long after when I was done playing all these different games and learning on my own. So you can either define your own outcome and play the games accordingly, or you can choose your own games and the outcome will define itself. But you really should stop fighting over things that look prestigious and craft your own life. Because if the games you're playing have a defined outcome with a linear path, like get an internship at Eli Lilly, go to Lilly after graduation, work your way up the corporate ladder, they're probably not your games, and they're probably not your definition of what it means to live a good life. So a journey with lots of free will typically not make sense to others, but you'll stay winning along the path. And lastly, just some unsolicited advice from Times Yonder for your time here, especially if you want to actually dive into the process of defining for yourself what it means to live a good life. First, take some philosophy and non-Christian related religion courses. This is the best way to kind of think about how to live a good life. One of my favorite quotes that I learned here in a class with Dr. Blix was from the German literary critic Hans Gregor Gadamer. And it's the problem with knowing only one culture isn't that you don't know others, it's that you don't know your own. If you don't have a frame of reference to look back and forth and compare things to, how can you break free from our societal games, decide which games you want to play for yourself, and then craft your own vision? Secondly, study abroad. And I mean that to a country that's non-English speaking and non-Christian. A vacation to Harlexton can be a lot of fun, but what are you really learning and exploring if they have the same way of thought that we do here? And most importantly, spend more time with your Wabash brethren and be there for them. September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. I lost two brothers during my time here, Austin Wyrick and Evan Hansen, and I think a lot of that could have been avoided if we just lend an ear to each other a lot more and figure out how we can support each other and play in our own games. Because if you find yourself feeling down that you're not meeting society standards, Wabash standards, are you playing your own games or are you playing Wabash's games? So look out for each other and encourage each other to play your own games. We're all going to make it. Thank you, Wabash.